Blessings to everybody. We're late today, so I might get some viewers later. But blessings to everyone who is watching. We thank you for your patience. We had a little emergency today. Um, this morning I went to a Sabbath service with at an assembly that's close by my house, maybe about 30 minutes away, 45 minutes away. And thank you, Hannah. And they the pastor was doing the teaching, and in the teaching he was demonstrating that there is one God, that Yahweh alone is God, and that no one else helped him create. That Yeshua is his servant. That Yeshua is not God. And I thought, wow, this thing is really catching on. So people are starting to understand that we've been in years and years of tradition, and that tradition is starting to break off. And so I bless Yah in hearing, that good news. Um, Last week we talked about the flood. I don't know if I mentioned Gilgamesh, but various religious religions have different religious. They have different stories about the flood. All of the religions have a story about the flood. Even in China, there are stories about the flood and about a man who made it through that flood. Um, and so one of the things that we didn't notice was that in the Bible it talks about the Kenites, the children of Cain. And so if the whole world was flooded, how did the children of Cain survive? Geology has proven that flood was in the Middle East. Okay, so it wasn't a worldwide phenomenon. And so we were talking about the flood, and we started talking about the patriarchs, and I got rudely interrupted. But let's get into that now. We're going to go back to Genesis chapter 11. And what you'll notice is that there's a whole genealogy there, right? The genealogy is made to for us to understand that Abraham is a descendant um, of Shem. But here's something that you don't understand, that a lot of people pass up. And we're going to go to Genesis chapter 11. And then we're going to start at verse 26. Genesis chapter 11, verse 26. Genesis chapter 11 and verse 26. It says, and Terah lived 70 years and begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Now these are the generations of Terah. Terah begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran begat Lot. Notice here that this in itself is repeated. Verse 26. And Terah lived 70 years and begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Then in verse 27 it says it again. These are the generations of Terah. Terah begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran begat Lot. So that's an indication that there are two stories there. Okay. And Haran died before his father Terah in the land of his nativity, in Ur of the Chaldees. Verse 29, and Abram and Nahor took them wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, and the father of Iscah. Um, but Sarai was barren. She had no child. Okay, so here's something that's important. What does Sarai mean? Sarai means princess. So there is a theory floating around that Sarai was a princess and that Abram was a prince and that their marriage was to solidify a political union. Well, the problem with that was that Sarai was barren, and so that's kind of significant. Okay, we're gonna keep going though. That type of stuff is not important. There's a text that says that Abram was a Syrian and Sarai was a Hittite, and so that marriage being a political union would make sense. But anyway, verse 31, and Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran, his son's son, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees, and to go into the land of Canaan. And they came to Haran and dwelt there. So there's something wrong here. So it tells us that Haran, Abram's brother, died in the land of their nativity in Ur of the Chaldees. But then it tells us that Terah, it wasn't Abram that left his homeland. It was Terah, Abram's father, who left the homeland. And he brought his children with him. Okay? And so this is different than Genesis chapter 12, where it's telling us that Yahweh spoke to Abram and told him to leave the land of his nativity. So something's going on. There's a double story, and they're contradicting in their details. In the overall story, it can overlap and be fine. But if the details are contradicting, did Terah leave the land of his relatives, or did Abram leave the land of his relatives? So Genesis chapter 11 tells us that Terah, Abraham's father, was set to migrate to Canaan, and they came to Haran. Okay, we don't know where Haran is. And so that's significant in itself. What we don't see is that there was a migration pattern. We talk about the land of Canaan, and we use it so without shalom, brother Matthias. Thank you for being here, and sorry for being late.
Shabbat shalom.
Sister Hannah said Shabbat shalom. So Canaan, we use that term nonchalantly, but we don't. What we need to understand is that Canaan was a mix between Egypt, the Hittite Empire, and the Mesopotamian Empire. So Canaan was where these three empires converged, where they all came together. And that's something that we need to think about. And so, yeah, my computer's gonna die.